and I have the pleasure of introducing our panelists tonight and also of getting to ask some questions. So we'll start, if you guys would just raise your hand, wave when I introduce you. So first we have Rashida Ogletree George, and Rashida is the Deputy Chief of the Civil Rights Division at Maryland's Office of the Attorney General. She supervises division staff, assists the chief in overseeing the division's enforcement efforts, and helps shape its policies and protocols. Prior to her current role, Rashida served as an expert on civil rights and police practices, assessing whether law enforcement agencies' practices aligned with the constitutional mandates, nationally recognized best practices, and community expectations. She was the managing director of the Policing Reform Campaign at the Legal Defense Fund. Rashida also spent 9 years in the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. As special counsel, she helped lead the group conducting pattern or practice investigations of police departments. Rashida started her legal career as a staff attorney in the Special Litigation Division of the Public Defender Service for the District of Columbia. In that role, she worked to vindicate the constitutional and statutory rights of PDS clients who were incarcerated or in the community under supervision. Rashida graduated from Columbia University and received her JD from NYU School of Law. So that's Rashida. Brandon Russell is a community organizer and advocate who ran for county commissioner in 2022. Brandon has previously served on the St. Mary's County Democratic Central Committee and the Rural County Community and LGBTQ Diversity Leadership Council with the Maryland Democratic Party. He was also an at-large member of the Policy Committee for the Moore Miller Administration Transition Team. Brandon is currently the second vice president of the St. Mary's County Democratic Club and the vice chair of Pride Southern Maryland, a volunteer nonprofit that hosts an annual LGBTQIA Pride celebration. Brandon also represents Southern Maryland as a commissioner on the Maryland Commission on LGBTQIA Affairs. Brandon is passionately involved in connecting the community with their government. Through his website, Informed St. Mary's, Brandon provides factual, relevant, and timely information, empowering county residents to be informed, get involved, and make their voices heard. And finally, we have Mia Bowers. Mia is a hardworking and dependable community leader with a strong record of having an impact on those around her. For over a decade, Mia has demonstrated her passion by serving the community in various ways. As a member of the transformative mediation community since 2015, Mia has been trained to conduct mediations, including, but not limited to, child access, attendance, re-entry, property and district court, landlord-tenant, small claims, peace orders. In addition to mediation, Mia is a skilled facilitator trained to facilitate large and small groups, IEP, individualized education plans, and community conversations. In past careers, Mia created and implemented educational programs. She was elected the president of the St. Mary's County branch of the NAACP 7025 in January 2025. When Mia is not encouraging others to volunteer or donate to local causes, she enjoys curling up to a good book, listening to live music, watching movies, and exploring new foods. Mia. All right, thank you all for joining us tonight. I think we're just going to jump in to our questions. So, given the current political climate, what changes or impacts do you anticipate from the new federal administration on civil rights and justice issues? And that's a big question.
Just a little bit. I'm happy to just get us started. I think we're already seeing those changes and impacts with the executive orders that have been coming out fast and furious. We have seen the othering of people, dividing communities, the perception, spreading the misperception that people of color in a workplace are only there because of hiring quotas and not because they deserve to be there. And I think we are seeing just this effort to divide people and undermine the civil rights progress that we've made over the past decades.
I anticipate we're going to see more fallout as people don't really realize that this DEIA or woke is much bigger than what the what the dog whistle that it's being used for, right? And so people are already seeing that positions are being eliminated, departments are being eliminated, that wouldn't on the surface immediately people think my job is going to be at risk. And so I think one of the fallouts from this is actually going to be more connection, because we are already divided, but as things are crumbling around us, we're not going to have much of a choice but to reach out for those who are also reaching. You know, but so much anger we can have still from, oh, you voted, okay, whatever. We're all in this now, and we're only going to be able to get through together. So I feel like one of the end results of that is going to be some unexpected partnerships and relationships that are going to be forged.
Yeah, and I would add that obviously there's going to be a lot of fallout across many different areas from what the Trump administration is doing, but I'm kind of hopeful that it will redirect people to focus more on their localized issues and state issues, because since we can't necessarily count on federal protections that have been in place for years, we need to look to fortify those things locally and at the state level if they are not already. So I think coming out of what is happening at the federal level will, and like I said, hopefully reinforce values that we share, where we can find equality at the lower levels to protect ourselves.
Okay, thank you. How do we define justice for all in the current social and political climate, and how has that definition evolved since the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964?
My immediate thought in answering that question is, we're watching civil rights and justice for all be redefined in real time. And we're watching the need for states and localities to respond to what is happening at the federal level. Just from the LGBTQ plus community's perspective, we've been really lucky that we live in a state that supports our community, and that we have a governor and a state house that also supports our community in various different ways. It's worth noting that Governor Moore was the first governor to celebrate Transgender Day of Visibility from the State House, and he's done that several years in a row now. He signed executive orders early on in his administration protecting access to gender-affirming care and expanding different protections for the LGBTQ plus community, and all of those are really great things. But that was before the Trump administration that we currently see was back in office. And so the need to respond and, again, reinforce some of our protections at the state level is still present. There are still areas where maybe in employment protections that the entire LGBTQ plus community is not necessarily covered under all circumstances. So we still have work to do. I've kind of maybe drifted from the question, but I do think that it is important for, as Mia said, for us to ensure that while we're trying to reinforce what we stand for and make sure that our communities are protected, that we're also being able to reach out and bring in more people, because at the end of the day, to combat what is happening at the national level and with all of the divisive rhetoric, it is going to take a deeper understanding of each other and making people see that, somebody who is trans is not necessarily extremely different from any other person. They are the same. They want the same things out of life. They want to be safe. They want to have access to resources and have a loving family or friends around them. So building those bridges between communities is going to be vitally important.
Absolutely. for me, I think that's a very interesting question. I've been grappling with justice for all since I was in the 4th grade. I have not stood and recited the Pledge of Allegiance since I was in the 4th grade because of justice for all. I didn't see justice for all. And I feel where we are now is a reminder that we never got there. I believe we got close, that we have been making great strides and have made great progress. But then things slowed down. And then we had become somewhat complacent. And I'm going to say somewhat because I know there's people like myself and Brandon and others we've always been fighting. There's always something to do and we're always going to be there doing it. But on the larger scheme of things, you hear that, oh, racism is dead. When? No one told me that until you, and I'm not sure that I believe you, right? So I think where we are right now is really examining what does that mean to have justice for all. We have one of our residents in our own state that's been shipped out through a clerical error. And instead of fixing said clerical error, it's like, let's change the law. Justice for all? Where? I feel like we are in a moment in time where it's time to examine exactly what does justice for all mean, and are we even close? Someone talked about closing loopholes in some meeting I was at the other day, and it was driving me crazy because I'm like, yeah, we got a lot of loopholes to close, or things to solidify by law. I think just by the virtue of what we're seeing and living in these unprecedented times, we didn't shore up a lot of things. We left a lot of stuff to goodwill, and that includes that justice for all piece. So I think we have a lot of work to do there. And I think we are also learning a lot if we're paying attention to what's happening on how to write those laws and how to close those gaps. Because we will. I have confidence that we will. We've done it before. We've been in worse times. And we're going to get battered and bruised. Some of us may not make it. Most of us will. And on the other side of that, we have a clear example, I think, of things we need to fix to prevent us ever getting back here again. The checks and balances that we thought we had are being tested. We're failing that test. So I don't think we've ever accomplished justice for all.
I just want to follow up on Brandon's point about the importance of the law at the local and state level in these times. When you think about the Civil Rights Act, it was broad in so many ways because it impacted discrimination in education and public accommodations and employment. So there was this breadth to it, but it was narrow in the sense that it only applied to discrimination based on race, color, religion, and national origin. When you think about where we are today at the state level in Maryland law, there are anti-discrimination provisions based on sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, and housing. There's source of income discrimination is prohibited, ancestry. And so I think at the state level, we've been able to expand who is deserving of protection and recognizing that so many people are encountering obstacles just to get the basic things that we need on a day-to-day basis, a job, a house, and that looking solely at race, color, and national origin may be too limited of a perspective.
Thank you. So kind of a similar question, but for you guys personally, what does true justice look like for marginalized communities, and how can we as a society move closer to this ideal?
I think that's not a decision that we can make, right? I think that the answer to that depends on, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer, right? It is depending on which marginalized community you're talking about and what the priorities are for that community. And so I don't think that, I won't speak for everyone, but I will speak for myself and say that I don't think I have the answer for every marginalized community and how to make each community feel like they are getting the justice they deserve.
Yeah, this is a really tough question to answer. I kind of feel like it almost is a moving target, because as our culture and our communities are evolving and we're understanding, the differences that we share, and excuse me, and the differences that we have and the commonalities that we share, that concept of true justice for all is going to continue to change. It's changed over the course of our country's history. But I think in trying to achieve that is where we find the mission, right, for what we are hoping our country is going to be one day, is that we will be able to achieve this as we know it in the time that we live, and that future generations will have the ability and the wherewithal to change it for themselves and the time that they live. And unfortunately, we've been a few hundred years behind the time that we live in for quite some time, so we have a lot of work to make up and work to do. But for me, I think the goal would be to have an ever-changing, evolving understanding of what true justice for all is, and trying to meet that as it does change.
Brandon, I want to build on what you're saying, because I think in order to get that, something that we need in society, not just as it relates to the marginalized communities, but for all, is that to actually listen to one another, listen to what's being said. I think a lot of times service providers sometimes want to do for, I want to do this for this community, I'm going to provide that for this community, but no one's listening to the community. How do we know what's just if we haven't asked them what it feels like? If no one's listening, would it ever be just? I think, that's, for me, deep, and I'm a step over here because I can talk for 3 hours straight about listening and how to do that better. But I think one of the things, and that's a super, meta, is that we need one justice system. Right now, it's not. I mean, we have a president that is a convicted felon that will likely never see the inside of a jail cell, likely never actually pay the monies that have already been ordered to pay, and that's going to ultimately be okay. As long as we have two very clear justice systems, again, I go back to justice for all. If I'm in the right, justice system, perhaps I can rest assured that I'm going to get that. So I don't have an answer for how do we do that, but I see a very clear problem. I see a very clear issue, and it definitely starts with accountability for our elected officials, no matter how far up the food chain.
Okay, so what steps can we take as people inside and outside of these communities to ensure that the voices of Black, Indigenous, people of color, women, LGBTQ individuals, and people with disabilities are included in this conversation about justice?
One is listen. Not only, so I did a big project a couple of years ago on trying to identify the systemic needs of Lexington Park and the things that need to change, and right, I did all this listening sessions, and we're diving deep, and one thing that really came out of that process for me was nobody's listening. Not only are people not listening, they're not even invited to the table. Not even at the table. And oftentimes when we are invited, because I am obviously a person of color, I'm a woman, I live in Lexington Park, I'm a very active parent, so oftentimes when it's time to check that box, they're calling me up. Hey, we need a parent. You hear that? Parent. to sit in this table at this meeting. And then I'm at this meeting, the full agenda is already done, all of the conversations and discussions have already been had, and they're having this meeting with a parent and not asking for any input. And when input is given, it's often dismissed or quickly explain why it could never happen. So if we want to include those communities that we say we want to represent, that we say we want to support, treat them as equals and put them at your table. Don't just invite them to sit in on the meeting, make them a part of the committee. And then each year get a new person, because once they've been with you for a year, they're one of you, now you need a new community member. And also to keep those voices fresh. We need to do a better job at listening and inviting people to the table.
I agree completely with the idea that we need to do better at listening. I would add that it takes humility and accepting that we don't know all the answers, right? And that whatever experience we have or background, whether we went to law school or we don't come into this with the answers on the right approach, what the goals are. It is hearing from people who are most impacted on a daily basis and letting them set the agenda and set the priorities and think about what the outcome should be. I think that's part of listening and a part of humility and not getting in the way of progress.
Yeah, I agree that listening is a huge part of it. I also think that if you are in the room and you see that there is someone who is not represented, or a group of people who are not represented, then ask why, or ask, can we add somebody to this group? It's kind of everybody's responsibility to make sure that we have a diverse representation if we are on a committee for something, or if we're trying to make a decision for, I don't know, like the HOA, even everyday things. Make sure that everybody is represented. And I think that if there are instances where, maybe there is, I certainly have had experience with people like this, there may be a person who seems like a difficult person to work with because they're always the one throwing up an objection to something or pointing out a flaw. That is not necessarily a bad thing. It seems like it's annoying because we want to progress with the work and there's so many things to do and we want to get it done, but oftentimes the people who are pointing out the things that are missing are doing so for a good reason, and they should be included, and maybe they have ideas on who else we can include in the conversation. So I think broadening kind of just how we are considering the people who are involved in whatever it is, or how we are choosing to involve people, and making sure that we are being very not only strategic but also intentional about it is important.
Good, okay. And so we talked a lot about just like including people who are relevant to the conversation. So one of those like disparities I think that can come up a lot are generational gaps. So how do we bridge generational gaps in the civil rights movement, especially between older activists and younger generations with different perspectives on justice and equality?
I think conversation is important, but I think part of that conversation is letting go of any judgments about what is the right way to do things. I think there may be people who feel strongly about strategies that were used during the civil rights movement and the years after the civil rights movement, and there are others who have different perceptions of what is the best way to have an impact. And I think just having conversations and letting go of there being one right way, there are so many tools in the toolbox that people can rely on and use. And I think sharing that information without judgment is a good first step.
I agree. I think that's the answer, right? And so that makes me think, like, how can we go about creating an environment and where that information is going to flow easily and be reciprocal. I think right now we do a lot of things in silos, and that definitely includes the different generations. And so that going back to that, being intentional about who we are inviting to the events or to the conversations, and being open to that. I think right now what I see is the older generation is a little afraid of the rapidly moving technology, and so the idea of the tickety talks, and it's like, ooh, I don't know about that. While at the same time, the younger generations, we have that instant gratification. Let's get it done now. Well, let's do a protest this weekend, and by next weekend, problems fixed. And so those two things are at odds with one another. So I think there definitely needs to be some movement on both sides, with the younger generation really just understanding and accepting things take time to have change. We're talking about big systematic change. That's going to take time. It's going to take not weeks. It's going to take months. It could take years. And to have the dedication to stick with it, I think is a big message I think our younger generations need to hear. And because what I see, the pushback from the older generation is they just want to do it their way and not anything else. And then it's like, it's both sides, right? Both sides do that. I'm not going to say it's just the younger generation does it. But what happens is the younger generation then abandons the older generation when it doesn't happen quickly. And what I see in most service organizations, the mean age is 55 or older, easily. You get a young person in the room, like, ooh, we're young people. I was the young people for 18 years. I'm still the young people. Something's not right with that sentence. You come and you leave. So I know we're talking to a lot of young people, so that's why I think, I want to talk to you just a little bit. Stick to it. Stick to it. If the older people in the room aren't listening, say it louder, say it differently. Get one, be buddy with and say, help me say this so that they'll hear. And vice versa. Older people, get a young person that you love and say, tell me how to talk to y'all because we're missing something. We're drifting further apart and the issues are getting larger. So again, that deliberate connection, we have to do better at that.
Yeah, I think it definitely is about the conversation, and there's almost like a mentorship in what you were talking about, Mia, where, and I certainly experience it also, the frustration of being involved and trying to do the work, and everything moves at a glacial pace, and, you have to take very small wins sometimes that seem worthless, but in the long run, they may not be. And so, when I first started getting involved locally, I experienced a lot of that frustration because I wanted things to change quickly, and I didn't really grasp how slowly government works in general, much less trying to change people's minds about something. So I think that, a lot of what I hear from young people is that there's no point in being involved because, it's not going to change. Look at all of the years of work that have been done, and we're still dealing with this stuff, and I'm frustrated, and people aren't listening to me, and all of these things, and all of that is very true, and it is frustrating, and it makes me even want to quit doing whatever it is that I'm doing at the time sometimes. But it is important to stay involved, and it is important just to show up. I mean, you can show up and just be there. You don't have to, yell and scream at a protest or have a sign. Just be present is a great first step. And you find often when you do get involved that you find community, and you find those people who can kind of do what you were talking about, where it's let's connect over this. Let me share what I've experienced as part of the older generation and how we've kind of fought for things, and maybe where now, that didn't work. And so we're looking for a new strategy or whatever it is. Just sharing that information and having that partnership is very valuable.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit more towards students for a minute here, because a lot of us here are students or otherwise involved in secondary or higher education. So what role do formal and informal education play in creating a more just and inclusive society? And how can schools and higher education better engage students? And how can students engage themselves in conversations?
Wow, okay. I'll go back to what I just said, show up. I'm a super local person, so, I follow local government, and a lot of the time when I'm going to a meeting or I'm watching a meeting, I'm seeing the same faces in the crowd. There are not, many of them are not young people who have something to say. I think that showing up and just being there is, like I said a minute ago, it's a great first step, because even if you are not necessarily engaging in the conversation, being able to hear the conversation and then maybe consider how you can get engaged in it will really open the door. And I think that it is, it's important to, no matter what anybody tells you or what it may seem like here locally, our county government is run by a board of county commissioners who are all Republicans and have very different views from probably a lot of us or all of us in this room on certain things. And giving them the feedback of your different viewpoint, even if it doesn't make a difference that first, second, third, 5,000th time that they've heard it, is still worthwhile, because they need to know, no matter elected officials, no matter what their level, need to know that there are people out here who support these causes, who feel this way about something. And eventually, if you can get enough people to continue to deliver that message, it does have an impact. It's going to take time, but it does have an impact, and it is important that they hear it, whether or not they're going to listen to you, like I said, the first 5,000 times you say it.
I just want to touch on the informal education piece. As someone who has 3 nieces who are either in college or recently graduated from college, I think the informal education piece of talking to your family members who have been through this, who have lived through sort of the civil rights movement and previous efforts to create change, who have maybe sat in segregated schools, right, or participated in segregated workplaces. I think having those conversations and learning from family members, that is an education that you're not going to get anywhere else. And so I would just encourage that. I have a middle schooler, and I always ask her to talk to my mom about what was it like to be in Baltimore in the 1950s, and talk about that experience. And so I would just, there are ways to sort of learn and grow at a very informal level, just with the people in your circle.
I like that. I'm going to have to encourage the kids to do a bit more speaking with grandma, and speaking with our elders. I think that is something that, for me personally, has been kind of missed. So thank you for that. I think as far as programs like today, and programs like the college put on just a few weeks ago with trying to connect the students to community organizations. On campus, I think, schools have a huge responsibility to expose the students to more, to give them the opportunity to see more, to hear different opinions different perspectives, like even with, on this panel, I would have loved to have had someone with opposite views of mine to be a part of this conversation. Because again, we don't grow, we don't learn, can't move forward without it. And so I think when we have, when schools provide these opportunities intentionally, I think is a huge step, as far as how to make that more accessible for the students that are on campus, especially ones like in rural areas like here where you may be kind of trapped. To bring people to the school and expand those and have uncomfortable conversations.
Okay, thank you. Those are some really good thoughts. So, how do you stay hopeful and motivated in the ongoing fight for justice, even when progress, like we talked about, can seem slow or non-existent?
Me personally, I'm very goal-driven and task-oriented, so I focus on the goal. And since we have a very big, huge goal, then I always got something anchoring me, because I know it's not going to happen immediately. I call onto my ancestors and say, hey, they made it through. You've heard me say it today. We've been through worse, and we'll get there. And I really have to believe that and keep that centered, because you can quickly drown in it all. Quickly drown in all of it. And I'm very intentional about how much information I'm, receiving in to protect my peace. And I encourage everyone to do the same. Don't let it get you.
I agree with that. I think it's important to look back in order to look forward and think about how much people were able to do with limited resources, fewer tools, and how impactful they were able to be. And I think when you put it in that perspective, it gives you some hope that in this day and age, we can do that. And I think on a personal level, for me, just looking for opportunities to find joy, disconnect from news, spend time with family, breathe, all the things that keep you going when it feels like the world is in some ways falling apart.
And I'll say be intentional about that. Be very intentional about finding your moments of peace. Sorry.
No, it's very important. I struggle with that myself. There's always a million things to do, and I feel like I always have to do all of them. And so being intentional about how much information I'm taking in, what news I'm watching or reading, when is it important for me to be knowledgeable about something, and when can I kind of just, let it slide for now, is something that I continue to try to reinforce within myself. And finding community is very important. Having people around you that love you, and understand what it is that you want to do or you're trying to do, or maybe who are even fighting alongside you, is very important. I know my husband and I share a lot of frustration about similar things. Being involved in PFLAG, he's the president of PFLAG Southern Maryland, and I'm involved with Pride Southern Maryland, and so we see a lot of the same issues affecting people, and we see a lot of the same call to actions that we feel obligated or responsible to kind of engage with. And so having somebody like that is very nice at the end of the day, to just kind of be able to level set with each other and say, okay, let's get some perspective, this can wait, and let's go do something fun that is for ourselves, rather than focusing on whatever it is at the time.
Okay, I'm gonna go off script a little bit here because I thought of a question. But what do you talked about, Brandon, going on, like intentionally deciding what you inform yourself about and what you don't. How do we determine what we need to be informed about and what we can take a step back from?
Yeah, it's not easy. I think it's very helpful, first of all, to know what it is you're passionate about. That is the starting point for what you can choose to inform yourself about, choose to read up on. And it's also helpful, again, going back to having a community. If you have, a couple of friends and you know that each of your subjects or passion areas are different, then, let them deal with theirs and you deal with yours, and maybe you just kind of share information when you need to. Or I find also a lot of what I'm doing now, especially post-election, is not watching television news. I'm going back more to let me read actually, what somebody is writing or what a specific executive order or piece of legislation or whatever it is says, and try to understand it through that method. Because if you're watching a video, even on social media, videos a lot of the time, video media is heightened and it's designed to get you engaged and keep you engaged and, get you doom scrolling and going down the rabbit hole. And so it's much easier by restricting my intake of that type of media and sticking to more of written media for me to navigate what it is that I need to know or what I can set aside for now.
Either of you have any thoughts?
My answer's the same.
Okay. It's a good answer.
Yeah, I stopped watching news in 2016. You know what happened back then? and I like to read anyway, so I was doing both, and I cut that out. And then I also just cut off social media.
Yeah.
I was becoming judgmental, and as a mediator who prides herself on remaining neutral, I did not like how judgmental I was becoming on social media. And so I cut it out. I couldn't tell you what's happening on social media. People tell me, and I'm like, oh, really? That's interesting. But I get a third, fourth hand. I have no clue.
I am guilty of still watching the news, but I do try to be intentional about limiting when I do that. I don't do it first thing in the morning. I wait until I'm centered and can handle any bad news that comes. But I do try to be intentional about setting aside time during the day to step away from it.
And one other thing I will add to that too is, if reading is not your thing because it can be time consuming, podcasts. Find a good podcast or something you can listen to. For me, it's better for me to listen to a podcast and get my news than kind of watch the visual images of war or Trump up there saying whatever he's saying that day, and I can't listen to it. So if I can listen to a podcast and somebody else maybe summarizing the things, and I don't have to directly hear the trauma-inducing phrases or words that he's using, that's all for the better.
Okay, thank you. And going beyond just keeping ourselves informed, what actions can individuals, communities, and institutions take to make tangible progress towards justice for all, particularly within historically marginalized communities?
Individuals, communities, and institutions. Yes. Institutions can start by taking a look at their policies. Taking a look within and figuring out, do your policies address the current needs of the day? Is there anything that needs strengthening within that? Doing a deep dive. Individuals, no, communities. I think communities right now are looking for a way to connect. And so I'm going to bridge the community and the individual, because the individual, I'm going to say, join service organizations. There are plenty of groups out there who are looking to do, who are already doing, who needs you. People say, how do you get involved? Just show up. Nobody is going to turn you away. We all need you. Show up. And then when you find your people that you have the same passion, you have the same mission, go out and engage your community. Help bring community together. We are disconnected and disconjointed. I think we've said that a lot. So go with the people who have the action, that have the resources, and work collectively together and bring that energy to your community. I have been saying for forever, when I was still on social media, my tagline is, we can change the world for the better, one community at a time. I believe that with everything. So if you're engaged within groups, and those groups are engaged in community, next thing you know, we are making strides. We're on fire. As long as those institutions are ready for us and to show up in a way that they say they want to be connected to the community because their policy is demanding it, then we're cooking with fire.
I would just add for the institutions, and I'm using that word broadly, just not backing away from diversity and inclusion and being scared to have a diverse workforce and believing the lie that diversity and inclusion is unlawful. I think it's a priority to keep those best practices in place and look to a wider applicant pool and make sure that you have different voices at the table in the institution.
The only thing I would add is look for opportunities for accountability. As individuals or community groups, look for opportunities to hold institutions accountable, each other accountable if it's needed, and for institutions, again, holding themselves accountable, but don't shy away from the people on the outside who are trying to hold you accountable for something or suggesting that maybe a policy be changed, because that is the key to making sure that all of the things that we've talked about so far and achieving justice for all actually gets to the point where we want it to be and that it is achieved. So accountability is very is a very important and kind of key aspect, I think, to the entire process.
All right, so one last question, kind of a very similar question, but for everybody listening today, what is one concrete action that each of us can take as individuals to help achieve a more just society?
Join the NAACP 7025. Seriously, that's my answer. No, it is, but it's also really join a service organization that makes sense for you. I think that is a concrete, tangible thing that anyone can do right now, and it alleviates you from having to have all the answers.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The service organizations are always looking for more people and looking for volunteers. What you said earlier about, we're going to be glad you're there. We probably will scare you away with how glad we are that you're there to help, because the need is that dire. I mean, under normal circumstances, there is a heavy need out there, but right now, for sure, the amount of work and outreach that is happening or that could be happening to counteract what we're seeing at the federal level, even at the local level. We have elected representatives at the local level that are actively sponsoring anti-LGBTQ plus bills in the State House, and it just kind of goes by the wayside because I shouldn't say everyone, but the majority of people around here, seem to think that it's not that big of a deal, or maybe they agree with it. And so getting involved in the organizations who can help spread the message of why these things are important to know about, why we need to hold our officials accountable, is a great starting point for becoming, an active community member in general.
I'm going to give a less than concrete answer to your concrete question, but I think it's very much a personal choice, and it takes some reflection on what your strengths are and how you think you can most be helpful. But for someone, that may mean going to a protest at the Capitol. For someone else, it may mean getting the message out and educating people on civil rights through social media. It may mean volunteering. It may mean a variety of those things. And so I think it's a very, very personal choice, and it may take some time to figure out what's the best path for you, but there's so many opportunities to get involved.
and it is not all up to you.
All right. I have absolutely no concept of time.
Well,
So where are
I
we?
think we can open it up to questions.
Okay, yeah.
If you want to use that mic, we can.
Do we have a runner in the back, or okay? Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, either individual one from one of our panelists or just another general one, put your hand up and we'll get a mic to you.
I don't actually have a question, but I did want to agree with your comment about showing up. I think it's important when the county commissioners have their meetings, whether you have anything to bring up or not, it's important for them to see your face. Even if you don't go each time, if they look out there, they'll start to wonder, why are they here? Why are they here? Sometimes you may have a comment to make, but it's important to be seen. That's the important part of it. But that was it. I just had a comment.
Yeah, we can open it up for comments too.
Yeah. Excuse me. I think that that is very important to actually physically be present. Most of our elected representatives, probably all of them, have a way that you can send them an email or leave them a voicemail, but those are easily ignored. And if you are physically present, they will start to ask the questions about why are people showing up? What is it that drove them to come? Because they don't see a full room the majority of the time. And so when people do show up, they do stop and think about it.
Thank you. Miss Mia, your comment about you not standing or reciting the Pledge of Allegiance actually stuck with me. So my question would be just like, how will we try to integrate, our not beliefs, but like sort of things that resonate with us in the respectful way, or a way that doesn't come off aggressive or like complaining, if that makes sense.
I will first start by saying, get clear on what it is that you have issue with and find your voice. Sometimes it's less important to worry about who you are offending than saying what's important to you. So with the flag, for example, I know that's very offensive to some people. So I do stand, I do place my hand over my heart, and I give you a 100-watt smile, and I don't say a word. And if someone asks me, then for me that is an opportunity for a dialogue and a conversation. So it's not something that I'm doing big and for attention. It's something that I decided to do because we are taking, like we're making a pledge. And it just didn't sit right with me to take a pledge every single day for something that I didn't seem to be true. So find what that is for you and ask yourself, what can I do about it? Do I need to do something about it? And what should my first step be? Like Rashida was saying, it's such a personal thing. It's such a personal thing. And if you find that whatever that thing is that's just not sitting right with you, if doing something small isn't enough, then recruit more people. Because if you feel strongly about it, chances are other people do as well. And then you can start putting that collective energy together to find out what it is. Is it a policy that needs to be changed? Is it awareness that needs to be made? Do I need to step up personally and do something? Right now we have a lot of people who don't like the elected people who are running, didn't like the candidates, but not willing to run. Be ready to step into something uncomfortable if you can't sleep at night, right? And if you can, then that tells you something too. I don't need to do something huge, or maybe this isn't my thing. But for the thing that's sitting on your chest, get real intimate with it and yourself to figure out what should you do next.
So this kind of question, because I believe you guys said you had some experience kind of in education, and with a lot of what has happened recently regarding the Department of Education and a lot of uncertainties with that, what do you all think justice maybe looks like within the education system for students, whether it's at like the K-12 level or the higher education system, especially with everything that maybe an impending Department of Education closure or significant cuts to the department?
Well, I think most headlines about the Department of Education center on funding, and that funding is going away, which is 100% important because it allows the educators to do the work that they do. But the Department of Education also played a large role in enforcing civil rights protections, Title IX protections for marginalized groups, and without that resource there for people to go to, it's going to fall on the state's attorney's office and local groups or state groups to kind of step in and lead that charge or fill the gap. But I think going back to accountability and making sure that the local Board of Education is correctly serving the students in the way that they are required to by law, that they are making decisions that are in the best interests of students, not just some students, but all of the students, and challenging them when they are not doing that, or even if it is not necessarily a decision they're making, but maybe the way that they are representing themselves or representing the board or the school system. None of these things are minor, because if a person is not held accountable for something that they have maybe broken a policy with, it, for lack of a better term, empowers them to continue to do it. And so that is how we, I think, as community members, can play a role in making sure that these protections are not lost, is by speaking up when we see, if we're a student in the school system and we see a staff member or another student or somebody in the school acting inappropriately or not following the code of conduct or whatever it is, speaking up and telling somebody, even if it is not going to a Board of Education meeting and saying it outright in front of the entire Board of Education. It could just be finding a trusted person and saying, hey, this is not right, and I think we should look into it, or somebody should do something about it. That is kind of how I think about approaching things, because a lot of the larger things like funding and enforcing civil rights protections are out of my direct control. And so, having whatever impact I can have by responding to what I'm seeing or hearing or experiencing, I guess maybe helps me sleep better at night, because I know that I can have that impact.
When I look at the study of democracy, I think about study and education and what you have to do to have the skills to be in a democracy and to really to be actively involved. And this is a comment from me, and I think we need to talk about a paradigm shift in education. I mean, really get serious about how we're educating our students. The timing, we're still on that agrarian, society, the farming, and get off, and people want to take off because I'm stressed out and all of that. All of these things need to be taken into consideration. And I think that the whole issue of involving the students in a democracy is so important. Now, I was a principal of an elementary school, and we had a New American Schools approach, was all across the country. Each the schools were involved in projects to, build on improving education. And our project was called Roots and Wings, and it was from Hopkins University. And one of the major things we did in our school, which was high poverty, low income, racial, a balance, more of a balance, but they had simulations. And so if you were going to vote, the kids got to vote. The kids got to be involved in democracy. They had the student union at the 5th grade level, they were involved, and so I'm just thinking that if we don't change how we are educating students, that they're not going to be involved. If we say they're home, cook dinner, put it on the table, and you go out to the meeting and the kids are sitting home, they don't know where you're going, what you're doing, they're not involved. So you just can't expect them to become 21 years old and then all of a sudden join the NAACP or join the Lions Club. They don't even know what the Lions Club and the Rotary and all those things are. So, but there's not enough time during the day in schools for this kind of participation. So you're going to have to make the school year-round schools. Look at the school day. Participation to students that have after-school programs. But if there's no grant funding, and now we're dealing with, the Trump era, so there's not going to be much there for after-school programs and projects like that. But it's all got to be part of the curriculum, and there has to be time in order for us to get our young people involved, and there must be systemic and organized. And I'm telling you, if we don't do that, then I don't know.
Dr. Walthour just made me think of something which I'm sure happens a lot when she speaks, that she inspires a thought. But on the subject of paradigm shifts and thinking differently about things, and we had an earlier question about bridging the gap between older generation and younger generations being involved. I think we need to make sure that the younger generation feels important and empowered, and that they are taken seriously. And I'll give you an example. Our Board of Education at the county level has a student board member, as do the other counties in the state. But our student board member is a non-voting member, whereas student board member in certain other counties does have the power to vote. And so in our case, in St. Mary's, that student board member, while she does great work and she gives a very thorough update on her work every board meeting, if I were a student in the school system, or if I had paid attention to this back when I was in the school system, I probably would not have liked the fact that there's a student board member there to represent my voice, but has no actual power to do so. And so that, in St. Mary's County Public Schools case, the school system can tell the students, we want you to be involved, we want you to be, participate in democracy, but if you're not allowing the student to have a voice through their elected representative on the board now, then what is that message really, what is that message really telling the students?
I hate to shift the conversation away from education because I do think it's so important to get students more involved. But the question that's kind of been in the back of my mind throughout this whole talk is we've mentioned having a seat at the table, having conversations, and when I think of the issues that I care about, a lot of them are inherently national. So where is that table when we're talking about national issues? Because we know we can go to the commissioners meeting and all that at the local level, but how do we make our voices heard at the national level?
Well, It's a lot more difficult, I think, at the national level because there are so many people reaching out to have their voices heard. And so there's a lot of attention around, calling our elected representatives and contacting them to let us know how they feel, or maybe participating in, rallies and protests. And all of those are very good things and necessary things. But I'm a super locally focused person, and so something that I do, because I know I can call the White House and tell Trump how I feel about whatever he's doing, or I know I can call Senator Van Hollen or Senator Alsobrooks or Congressman Hoyer and leave them a message. And I know, I know that those messages are recorded and that they're tallied in some sort of way. But I feel like my time is much more impactful if I do go to my local representatives and say, hey, this is happening at the national level. Do you realize what it is going to cause at the local level and what we will have to deal with if this happens, and what are you doing about it? Because, like I mentioned earlier, the Department of Education and the funding piece, that could really do damage to our school system. And so recently I went to a Board of Education meeting and I said, since your last meeting, the Department of Education has started to be disbanded, and what are you doing as a Board of Education to educate our community and educate our commissioners and our state representatives about what this impact of the Board of, or what the impacts of the Department of Education going away would be for us? Because even though our local elected officials may be of the same political party as the people controlling the federal government right now, that doesn't mean that they can't object to what is happening, or that they can't push back to what is happening, because they should have enough knowledge and experience to realize that if these things happen, it's going to make their job harder to do, and it's going to piss people off down here, which they're going to have to deal with. Trump isn't going to have to deal with them. The commissioners are going to have to deal with them. The Board of Education is going to have to deal with them. So getting back to your point about making your voice heard at the national level, definitely call and contact our elected representatives at that level. And if it, if you have the time to participate in a rally or protest, do that too. But bring the national levels home and let your local representatives know how you feel about what's happening, and that you're scared or concerned or frustrated with their lack of action, or whatever adjective or verb you want to put in there, because they have the ability to push back against these things and try to at least protect our community from the impacts of those things.
I agree with everything Brandon said. And I will add that, with the local service organizations tend to also have a national branch of whatever that is, that does take on the bigger causes. So for example, with the NAACP, with the way that's set up, there is a national, there is a state, and then there's your local, and we advocate accordingly. So at the local level, that's our job. That's what we're told to do. What's happening locally, focus on that. If I wanted to be involved more on a statewide level, then I join the state conference, and then I can have an impact there. And if I say that's not enough, I want to go bigger, I can join the national. So there are national versions of organizations that are also looking for you.
And you, excuse me, boosting the work that is being done in whatever fashion that is for you, no matter whether it's on social media or telling somebody about it, is I can't underestimate the value of that, because just as NAACP has the different levels of organization, PFLAG has the same thing. And so PFLAG Southern Maryland may be focusing on providing support groups to the local LGBTQ plus community, but PFLAG National is engaging in lawsuits against the Trump administration, and being able to boost the fact that that is happening and make people aware increases the amount of people who can help with the cause overall.
I think you could probably hear me without. Yes.
Just a comment on that question, and it's something that's always, I guess, kind of gotten to me in terms of St. Mary's County and elected officials. They don't hold town hall meetings. Very rarely. We have Scott Ostro's been holding them. We have Brian, they hold them, you know, when they're out of session. But our Board of Ed members, and I know there's some stipulations about how you have to have meetings in the public and all that. But they have a little group of people that elect them. They pull them together during elections, and that is it. So now, when we talk about holding them accountable, it's up to us as voters, people with, you know, strong ideas about what needs to be done, to say, why aren't you calling us together and getting our opinions? You know, because they all, a lot of them depend on, you know, the top leader, like the superintendent. So the board members just, in my opinion, just kind of think, well, he's running the show, and so after they get elected, they don't reach out, in my opinion, the way they should. So I think more outreach, more town halls, more opportunities to tell them in between the sessions and meetings what we need. And that accountability, I think what Brandon said earlier, is very important.
And remember, especially for students here at the college who may or may not be from St. Mary's County or live here when you're not going to school, even if you are not a registered voter in St. Mary's County, you are still a constituent of our elected officials because you are still receiving services that they provide. So, you know, don't think that if you are not voting here that you can't show up to a meeting and give your opinion. We in this room still want you to do that for sure because, as I said, you are still affected by whatever the decision is that they are making.
I just want to say, you know, we're talking about DEIA and how it relates to where we are right now. I just want to put out there that, again, the way that term is being used right now, let's not pretend that it's not code word for black. Let's not pretend. Because when you look at things that have been removed, it's black people, right? Oh, we removed the records of black people. And unfortunately, in the hopes to make America great again, AKA let's segregate us again, let's get Jim Crow back around, right? Because they don't have to say it, they're doing it. Like, pay attention, right? We all paid attention, that's why we're upset, because we can see these things. And the unfortunate side effect of that is what we already know. DEIA is not about black people. We are one very small portion of DEIA. And so it impacts everybody and everything. Now, one program was made worse by getting more opinions. Now, one program was made worse by making sure that we were inclusive. It's not about that. Because when you ask, well, let's dig deeper into that. What exactly is wrong with diversity? No one ever says A, B, and C.
Yep.
So when we're talking about what are we going to do, we need to be deliberate on what it is. Because that informs us on our actions in the ways that we need to step up, in the way that we need to, what we're advocating for. Because in the desire to impact Black people, our country is hurting. And we don't have to be silent about it. Picking up the phone matters. Writing letters matter. Showing up to protest matter. But more importantly, standing in your conviction that it is right matters the most. I run a nonprofit organization. My funding has been attacked. Even the people who are allowed to volunteer for my organization has been impacted. But not once have I walked away from our mission to represent our community as it relates to age, sex, race, all of that. To serve our community, to make sure my board looks like my community. So when I'm asked the question, does your organization do, and that's how the emails come across. Do you guys do DEIA? I say with a reply all to everyone, yes, we do. And these are the things that we do, and these are the things that we're going to continue to do. It's going to take us to be brave in our convictions. When we say show up and like, why are all these people here? Because we're being brave. And just by virtue of your presence says a lot. I may not be on social media, but if you are, be brave on social media and not back down. Don't be silent. Don't go along with the flow. That disruption is what we need. Because if we all just tuck our heads and say, oh, well, you know, they didn't get to me yet, right? We all know the saying, when they came for, I didn't. Don't wait for them to come for you, because we already know what's happening. Women, I see a lot of women in here. Our right to vote, right? I'm a married woman. I took my husband's name. I don't get to vote anymore. Be prepared to do what it takes. Be prepared to get a citation, to get arrested, to be looked upon as if you're a troublemaker. Make good trouble. That's where we are right now. We need good trouble. Because if we don't make good trouble, we're going to be like, man, you remember at the beginning of 2025, and it was looking like we was going to get concentration camps in a different country, and we ain't do nothing? Remember when we was okay when, right? So I'm going to say, can we get uncomfortable? Because we do live in an area where maybe the majority of the people agree with what's happening. So that means it will be uncomfortable for us. Yes, we live in a blue state, but we live in a very red county. If we are not willing to say that this is not okay in the rooms where other people are because we don't want to ruffle feathers, we are doing all of ourselves a disservice. If we pretend like it's not about black people, we already got rules dismantling to get back those colored-only signs, white-only signs. It's coming. If we don't get uncomfortable, if we don't find our voices, if we don't self-evaluate and identify that thing that doesn't sit well in your heart and figure out what are you going to do about it. Even if that is talking to a friend, talking to a friend, talking to a friend. Yes, we want policy to change, but we need the minds of others to change. We need the hearts of others to change. We have all witnessed propaganda at its finest, where facts no longer matter. Facts no longer matter. We have to use our voices and impact those who are willing to listen to us and keep it going until we get hoarse. We have to change the minds and hearts of others because we, by ourselves, cannot get it done. We're talking about civil rights. The civil rights was done through a lot of action over a lot of time, a lot of different things. There was no one answer. There was no one answer. Community mediation centers, of which I am at the helm of one, were born out of the Civil Rights Act to create a space for systems change. Because no one can do it alone. You have to have that space to reach across and mend these fences that have been smattered, obliterated. We can't keep standing in our conviction of self-righteousness that we're not willing to say, okay, I know we disagree, but let's sit down and talk. Because now you're hurting too. Right now it's real easy to laugh at those who are hurting that voted for it, right? Who is that helping? Laugh at home with your partner. Laugh with your friends. In public, let's do the hard thing. Let's do the uncomfortable thing. If we're going to avoid the terrible things. That's what I'm saying.
I think, should we end on that note?
Yeah.
Let's do that. All right. Well, let's just thank our panelists. Thank you all for coming, and please be sure to visit the tables outside before you leave.